I want you to just imagine for a second that you're running with absolutely everything you have. Your lungs are burning, the air is just thick with smoke, and you keep bumping into terrified people in the dark. Well, this is exactly what a young student named Wang experienced. The Tiananmen Square he used to visit every peaceful morning had transformed into a literal fiery hell. The deafening roar of gunfire and the mechanical grind of approaching military tanks are just drowning out everything else.
Then the unthinkable happens. There's a sudden, sharp pain. A bullet strikes Wang squarely in the chest. He collapses, his shirt instantly soaking red. His mind goes blank, his vision blurs, and right as he fades out of consciousness, he sees the silhouette of an armed soldier slowly walking toward him. It's a terrifying, incredibly visceral climax, but it leaves us with a massive question, doesn't it? How did China, a nation aggressively pursuing modernization and economic prosperity, reach such a violently bloody breaking point in the summer of 1989? Welcome to this explainer. To truly understand the tragic events of Tiananmen Square, we have to look past the protests themselves and dig deep into the dramatic power shifts and economic upheavals that define the decade right before it.
Okay, to figure out how we get to tanks rolling through the capital, we have to flash back to 1976. Mao Zedong, after decades of continuous, frankly chaotic revolution, has just passed away. And this instantly triggers a massive, cutthroat scramble for the future of China. Almost immediately after his death, the ultra-conservative Gang of Four, who were basically the loyal executors of Mao's ideology, are arrested. And this clears the way for Deng Xiaoping. Now, Deng had actually been purged and cast out by Mao, but by 1977, he maneuvers his way right back into politics. Mao's chosen successor, Hua Guofeng, tries his best to resist this, but Deng leverages his vast network of party veterans who had also suffered under Mao. By the 1978 Third Plenum, Deng asserts his absolute vision for economic reform. And by 1982, Deng systematically outmaneuvers Hua entirely, stripping him of his titles to become the undisputed supreme leader.
Part 2. Deng's Pyramid of Power.
So here's the fascinating thing. Deng Xiaoping became the architect of modern China without actually holding the highest official political titles on paper. Instead, he created a completely unique system to maintain absolute control over the country from the shadows. At the very top, Deng appoints himself chairman of the Central Military Commission. He commands the armed forces, knowing full well that power, as Mao used to say, grows out of the barrel of a gun. Right below that, Deng establishes the Central Advisory Commission, packing it with veteran conservatives known as the Eight Elders. This group acts as a supreme veto board. Then for the actual top government jobs, General Secretary and Premier, Deng installs reformist allies like Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang. On paper, they are the most powerful men in China. But in reality, they're just the public faces executing Deng's orders.
His power totally secure, Deng focused entirely on transforming China's economy. And through the eyes of students like Wang, the country was changing at breakneck speed. This was largely driven by Deng's creation of special economic zones. If you look at foreign direct investment in 1981, Shenzhen, which by the way was just a humble coastal fishing village, absorbed a staggering 50.6% of all foreign investment entering China, mostly flowing in from Hong Kong. I mean, factories were popping up literally overnight, and massive skyscrapers were replacing dirt roads.
That flood of investment fueled an absolutely wild number, a 58% annual growth rate in Shenzhen alone. To put that into perspective, that was nearly 6 times the national average. For students like Wang who were witnessing this firsthand, it felt like magic. Millions of rural workers were flooding into cities for factory jobs. Out in the countryside, collective farms were being dismantled and replaced with a household responsibility system. This allowed farmers to actually control their land and keep their surplus profits. Agricultural output hit record highs, and the economy was just booming.
Deng Xiaoping literally broadcasted speeches telling the public to liberate their thinking and discard rigid ideologies to achieve modernization. But here's the catch. Opening the doors brought in foreign concepts of freedom and democracy right alongside that foreign money. And this resulted in a really intense clash of realities. On one hand, economic liberalization brought new ideas and higher wages. But on the other hand, there were painful side effects. As the state removed price controls, inflation skyrocketed. Income inequality grew rapidly. Suddenly, everything cost way more. And the strict political control of the Communist Party felt increasingly suffocating. Intellectuals and students began looking at this new wealth and asking a very dangerous question. Why can't we have political freedom to match our economic freedom?
Right in the middle of this rising tension, General Secretary Hu Yaobang, one of Deng's hand-picked men, emerged as a massive beacon of hope for the students. You see, Hu supported not just economic reforms, but genuine democratic ideals. He even refused to punish leaders of early student protests in Anhui province and actively pushed to replace older party members with younger, progressive leaders. For Weng and his peers, Hu was an absolute hero. But for Deng and the conservative Eight Elders, Hu was rapidly becoming a terrifying liability who threatened the party's absolute grip on power.
So this tension rapidly builds to a breaking point. By January 1987, Deng and the Eight Elders have had enough. They force Hu Yaobang to resign in a humiliating, unofficial meeting, accusing him of failing to suppress bourgeois liberalization, which is just a fancy term for foreign democratic influence. Fast forward 2 years to April 1989, and Hu suddenly dies. For the students, this was a devastating blow. Their one political shield inside the party was gone. This pure outrage directly sparks the next move. On April 15, 1989, students, including Wang, decide they have absolutely nothing left to lose. They pour into Tiananmen Square to demand change.
Protests swell to massive proportions. Students even erected a goddess of democracy statue specifically positioned to stare directly down at the giant portrait of Mao Zedong. The government tried to negotiate, but both sides were completely deadlocked. The students wanted political reform, while the party viewed any loss of control as an absolute red line. Night falls on June 3rd, and the deadlock is finally broken by the sound of military rifles. The government opts for brutal military suppression. Tanks roll in. Weng desperately searches the chaos and watches helplessly as a fellow student tries to wrestle a rifle from a soldier, only to be shot dead right on the spot. It brings a horrific realization, captured perfectly in this sentiment: there is just no way an untrained student can defeat a soldier with a gun. Weng tries to run, but a bullet finds him, bringing us right back to that terrifying moment he blacks out on the pavement.
Thankfully, Weng survives. He wakes up in a hospital the next day, only to be told by a nurse that the square has been completely emptied. The military cleared the heart of the capital in a single devastating day. And the true cost of that day? Well, it remains a fierce battleground of information. The official government toll claims 241 casualties, heavily emphasizing military losses. But independent estimates, drawing from hospital records and eyewitnesses, place the civilian death toll anywhere from 1,000 to 2,500 people. Tiananmen Square protests ended in blood, and Beijing was immediately hit with massive international sanctions from the US and Europe. But here is the profound historical reality: the Communist Party didn't fall. They doubled down. They crushed the political dissent and simultaneously accelerated the economic machine, eventually forging China into the second largest economy on the planet. This history leaves us staring at a deeply provocative question. Can a global superpower truly be sustained indefinitely by offering its people unprecedented economic prosperity in exchange for absolute political silence? It's a question the world is still watching China answer today.